I heard salt makes water boil faster.
That is a myth, and we're gonna bust it.
In this lab, we're testing whether or not adding salt to water will cause the boiling point to increase. The solute, salt, is non-volatile and therefore should cause the solution to have a higher boiling point than that of the solvent, water, by itself.
Our hypothesis is that the boiling point of the solution will increase by a small amount when a large amount of salt is added, but it will not change with only a small amount of salt.
Okay, so here we have 100 milliliters of water and 20 grams of salt on the scale, and we're going to mix it together, and we have that right here, and then we measure the initial temperature of the water, and then once we have that temperature, we put it on the hot plate over here, and we measure the temperature when it first starts boiling, and then measure it when it hasn't changed anymore.
In trial 1, 0 grams of salt were added to 100 milliliters of water.
In trial 2, 5 grams of salt was added to 100 milliliters of water. In trial 3, 10 grams of salt was added to 100 milliliters of water.
In trial 4, 20 grams of salt were added to 100 milliliters of water. In trial 5, 40 grams of salt were added to 100 milliliters of water. In this chart, we can see the initial temperature and the boiling point for each trial. This shows the data in graph form. This table and graph compares the average initial temperature and the average boiling point.
We reused the same 5 beakers during the experiment, so they could have had residual heat from the previous trial, and that could make the initial temperature of the later trials higher, therefore making the boiling point higher. We used multiple thermometers, so the numbers could have been different depending on which thermometer was used.
The measurements of water and salt could have been slightly too much or too little, and this would have affected the concentration of the solvent. We used tap water, not distilled, so there could have been other molecules in the water that altered the outcome. The initial temperature of the water does have an effect on the boiling point because high temperatures allow more of the solvent to be dissolved than in low temperatures. This is shown by our data because the trials that started with a lower temperature almost always had a lower boiling point than those that had higher initial temperatures. Sodium chloride is more soluble in warmer temperatures, and the more salt that is dissolved in the water, the higher the boiling point will be. Salt is non-volatile, meaning it does not easily become a gas. So when it is bonded to the water molecules, more heat will be necessary for the solution to boil.
With the addition of 5 grams of salt, the average boiling point was raised by a small amount, and with each increased amount of solvent, the boiling point continually increased. This proves that it would actually take a longer amount of time to boil water with salt than water by itself. The myth is busted. Adding salt to water will not make it boil faster.